Hey guys, you know the drill. It's old Rand here. This is being sponsored by Premier Pro Wrestling. And once again, Arab Wrestlers You Should Know, Part 2, my friends. Part 2, my friends. Today we're going to talk again about the Sheik, the original Sheik, Eddie Farhat. And what we're going to hit you up with today is some things that the general population did not know about the Sheik, and also the extreme heat that the Sheik got. One of the things that a lot of people like to say, a lot of people, even in the industry, and it may be in part true, that he killed off his territory because he was too old to be in the main events. Number one, that's a possibility and a probability. But number two, the issue is guys were stopping to learn how to work. So I think a lot of that was the fact that he owned it. Business started to dip. And old guys like me like to say that, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And I think that's honestly what happened, with his territory out of Detroit. So any hooser, while Farhart's desire to always be a star would hurt things in the end, his legacy as an icon in wrestling has been assured. It's been added to by his refusing to drop his act, and a nephew who became a hardcore legend in his own right, which they're talking about, Sabu. A recent biography finally highlighted his story, but here are 10 things wrestling fans should know about the Sheik. He is considered one of the top wrestlers in the 70s. The other thing about him, like I said yesterday in part one about the Sheik, he was a legit tough guy. So even though he stepped out of the box and did out of the box thinking and out of the box character and out of the box inside the ring, and one of the inceptors of quote unquote hardcore wrestling, when it comes from somebody who is a legit badass, people will believe. Born to Lebanese immigrants, Farhat decided to utilize that when crafting his wrestling gimmick. After starting as himself, he became the Sheik of Araby, the supposedly privileged son of rich Middle Eastern family. While that was good, Sheik decided to drop the wealthy part, and then that's when he transformed into a brawler. I think part of that, too, might have been because there were other Sheiks coming in, and you guys will really be surprised sometimes to find out about some of the goofiness as far as the industry goes with, spoofs or rip-off gimmicks, and Sheik, they would go to these little towns without TV and internet and blah, 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 and have fakes. So maybe he just wanted to hone that gimmick a little more because of shit like that. He was aided by manager Abdullah Farouk, who later became the world-famous Grand Wizard. Soon the Sheik was a hit out of Detroit to become a star, thanks to being a brutal wrestler with the likes the business had never known or never seen. Now that's pretty cool, because at the end of the day, for myself personally, the Grand Wizard is kind of a great uncle. And a lot of people, even from my era, who are from the Midwest, would only see the Grand Wizard in magazines, didn't realize the kind of heat that he had and the ring psychology. And just for example, he managed the Valiant Brothers and Handsome Jimmy for only a short while, and Jimmy credits the original Grand Wizard for teaching him so much about the industry, specifically about how to work a crowd. So that's pretty cool. Even in a time when kayfabe was held sacred, Sheik took it to a new level. No known footage exists where he isn't the Sheik. Even his whole family and friends were told never to address him by his real name. And as a result of that, folks, it wasn't somebody trying to get over on somebody. This is how we made our living. And I am coming from the last generation of kayfabe in the Memphis wrestling territory. And what happened when the curtain got lifted, ba-boom, death to the territories. The closest he came were the annual NWA meetings. Even then, he'd be in flashy outfits and only addressed as Sheik. In public, he would howl and scream, glower at everyone, and keep appearances up. When he was given a major honor later in his life, he still showed up in character. Sheik lived his gimmick like few wrestlers in history, and that added to the amazing mystique. Pretty damn cool. And here's another thing about the territory. Throughout the late 50s, the Sheik wrestled for the Detroit-based big-time wrestling promotion. In 1964, with his famous shirt, the Sheik bought out the promotion with his father-in-law as the puppet president. Okay, pretty cool. So the Sheik could keep up his act. Well, he backed him, so somebody must have believed in him, and I would hate to be in that awkward situation, asking an in-law for the money to do something like that. But God bless, look at the rest is history. The Cobo Arena was their home for constant sellout shows, as big-time wrestling was a major deal. They had real-life promotional war with Dick the Bruiser's WWA, but the economic troubles in Detroit would lead to a big-time going under in 1980. Yet for its time, it was as hot as many of the territories in the business. The other thing I want to say, and this is what happened when I was a kid, and I figured out what that UHF button was. One of the first things I saw was the Sheik versus Dick the Bruiser, and I remember the Sheik throwing fire, and oh my God, I was friggin' terrified, man. It was such a mystique, just like the word said. It's the best word to coin the Sheik, the mystique. Throughout the 60s and 70s, wrestling magazines loved to show covers of the Sheik, usually his face covered with blood, with his wild antics of brutalizing opponents and throwing fireballs. See the fireballs, guys? Once again, the Sheik was big business wherever he went. His main opponent was Bobo Brazil, as their long war raged for decades across the Midwest. He also had memorable wars with Freddie Blassie, Bruno Sammartino, and Abdul the Butcher, as the Sheik's trailblazing hardcore ways made him known as the most dangerous man in wrestling. Listen to this shit, folks. And I never knew this, and this is why I love doing these. The Sheik also aided in training Muhammad Ali in his famous bout with Antonio Inoki at the Tokyo Dome, folks. And that was huge. And what that was right there was Vince McMahon Jr. foreseeing the future insofar as how pay-per-view went. Now, Sheik mentored some great stars, and I can't wait to see what happens here. While Sheik wasn't quite known as a warm-hearted guy, he did manage to give a break to various wrestlers who would soon emulate his ways. That included Dusty Rhodes, who certainly emulated the Sheik in some bloody wars. And then he did, actually, as a heel. Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch were outstanding heels, and Dusty learned to shift that awesome charisma that he is known for, that awesome charisma that current WWE talent has his thumbprint on. Pretty cool. Likewise, the Sheik helped Lawrence Sheave latch onto the character of Abdullah the Butcher, who became hardcore icon in his own right. The Sheik also gave a break to a young worker by the name of Randy Poffo. Did not know this, and as you guys know, Randy Poffo is Randy Macho Man Savage, or was Randy Macho Man Savage. And then finally, the Sheik trained a young Rob Van Dam. He dominated the United States title. Let's see what this is about. Most associate the United States title with WCW, but various territories had their versions as well. Sheik's was the most famous of that bunch, and throughout its history, no one held it as long or as often. His first reign started in 1965, the year I was born, and lasted over 2 years. From there, the Sheik held the belt another 7 times, trading it back and forth with Bobo Brazil, the legendary Johnny Valentine, and others. While other guys did hold the belt in that time, the Sheik basically owned it until Big Time Wrestling went out of business in 1980. The championship around the Sheik's waist was a familiar sight to fans. And it was, too. I remember even being a kid at that time, watching Bruiser and seeing that belt. And to be honest with you, Bruiser's company was Worldwide Wrestling Association. And the belt that Sheik would come in with, the one that we just talked about, was actually a sharper belt, which I thought was pretty cool. Now, here's something you idiots need to hear. And also you India fans that don't get it. You just don't get it. Not losing was a big deal for him. If there was one major issue with the Sheik, it was losing. He hated doing it. The few times he did lose, it was by disqualification or countout. Almost never a clean pin, even when he lost the U.S. title. There had to be shady stuff coming to protect him. It was also a reason it was harder for him to work in other promotions, as he wouldn't even put Bruno Sammartino over. I hope to God that that's hearsay, but I don't think so. At the end of the day, like I says, you Indians, I don't understand what this too good to be doing job stuff when at the end of the day, you guys don't even know what the hell you're doing yet. Hilarious. Sabu is his nephew, as we already covered. But let's go ahead and see if we can go into more detail. This is amazing. If you guys can ever get a hold of it, I could kick myself for losing it. But I bought this from an old video store. It was actually on VHS, and it's an awesome video, man. And in there, I think the build-up was finally for the main event. The main event was a young Dusty Rhodes, probably in his early 20s, wrestling the Sheik that night. The promos and the build were just unbelievable. So through the 80s, the Sheik would still ply his trade in the indies, and a bit of fame in the documentary I Like to Hurt People. He gained further name by mentoring his nephew, Terry Brunk, who became Sabu. Sabu clearly emulated his uncle, from his outfit to never speaking English in public to obviously the hardcore brawling. Sheik aided Sabu getting into the business, and one of his final appearances was managing Sabu at ECW. It's clear how the Sheik's legacy lived on in his nephew. That's pretty cool. So hopefully Sabu produces a kid that likes wrestling, that maybe he can also carry on this great legacy. In 1992, while trying for a comeback, Farhat was put into a coma during a death match. A broken leg in 1995 finally ended his in-ring career for good. Having blown through most of his once great fortune, Sheik passed away in January 2003 at the age of 76. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame by Sabu and RVD 4 years later in 2007, and honored as a pioneer of hardcore wrestling. Guys, when God made the Sheik, Ed Farhat, he broke the mold. All right, guys. Again, this is Airbrush, as you should know, being brought to you without YouTube commercials. Be cool, like and subscribe. We are almost at 50,000 subscribers. And please take a look in the description on how you can support Premier Pro Wrestling. And please pay special attention to Premier Pro Wrestling's Patreon, where you can stream from almost 500 exclusive matches. Thanks again. We'll talk tomorrow.